Hey everyone. So let me ask you a question. Did you know that travel nursing in America began in the 1970s? To be specific, it started in the city of New Orleans, Louisiana in the year of 1978. See, due to a large number of acute injuries during Mardi Gras, hospitals throughout the city contracted nurses from nearby cities and states to help provide extra support. Around a decade later, in the 1980s, hospitals nationwide maintained that severe need for qualified nurses to help save lives and have the opportunity to dig deeper into their craft. Some were nurses traveling from a rural critical access facility to a large county hospital, while others were from large metropolitan trauma level 1 facilities looking to settle down in a much slower paced facility. For most nurses at the time, it was an opportunity to see different parts of the country, along with experiencing other cultures, allowing them to sharpen their skills within new environments. Today, travel healthcare is still easily accessible and providing the same opportunities nationwide to medical personnel of all professions. However, over the years, more and more healthcare workers have the motivation to travel, and it's significantly shifted. Rather than traveling to experience an adventure, more healthcare workers are beginning to place a monetary value on their services to travel. Due to conversations in the past with staffing companies, travelers have been programmed to focus on one question: what's the pay? Now, we all know that the healthcare worker shortage has been concerning for almost 2 decades. After the year of 2020, however, that shortage became a crisis. Demand rose significantly after COVID and kind of due to staff burnout. So as a result, hospitals approved inflated bill rates to convince healthcare workers to flee from the stability of their workplace, to leave the safety of their home, and to assist hospitals and other healthcare facilities throughout the nation. In its aftermath, money remains the primary motivation for so many. But is it the only reason and the best reason to travel? Join me as we discuss this extremely sensitive and fascinating topic: money motivation and its place in the world of healthcare travel. My name is John Kiwanuka, and this is Suitcases. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much again. This is Suitcases, Conversations for the Healthcare Traveler. Our guest today is none other than Miss Charisa Bailey, BSN RN. Charisa, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. I'm doing great. Now, before we get into all of this, you have a nickname or a different name that you go by, and it's Reese. It's kind of a shortened version of Charisa, but talk to us about that. How did that come about?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool too, because it's obviously my name is spelled Charisa, but Reese is Reese, which makes no sense. Long story short, I'm from a small town in rural North Carolina, and my first job ever, my manager was this wonderful lady named Joanne. And when I was first introduced to her and gave her my name, she said, "Nope, that's not going to work for me. And what else do you go by?" And I said, "Well, no, nothing. That's my government name." And she said, "Say it again." And I had to repeat it 3 or 4 times. And she goes, "Well, I just hear Reese." And it was actually a steakhouse. And so we had these cool little stars that we pinned on with our name. And she spelled Reese like the Reese Witherspoon or Reese's peanut butter cups. And I've been Reese ever since. So, yeah.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, today we're talking about money motivation. And I got to tell you, this topic in healthcare, healthcare travel specifically, makes me nervous to talk about. It also makes me extremely excited. This topic can go both ways. You just have to be careful with how you present it. So at the end of the day, I feel like it's a topic that needs to be talked about, and it's one that needs to be given attention. So with that being said, are you ready to talk about some money motivation in healthcare travel?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, first things first, we're going to start with your story. Um, you're an RN, you're BSN. Why'd you get into the field of nursing? Out of curiosity.
So I was actually planning to be an art history and English major, but my dad actually had a heart attack at the ripe old age of 40,
Hmm.
which was pretty astounding. And my mom and I had actually come home from shopping for my senior prom dress. And he's the practical joker and said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And I was like, ha ha, he's probably, joking about the cost of the dress. And didn't really make it in the house. He was sitting outside and it was so cold, I remember. And he was just profusely sweating. And I got past him and thought, oh, he's really actually not joking. And my mom's a nurse. So she was kind of, doing double duty, being a phenomenal mother and trying to make sure I'm not going to panic, but also going into, oh my gosh mode. And being that my dad is who he is, was like, no, we won't call the ambulance. Let's just drive. So we got him down to the hospital, and I will say, he's very blessed. He got flighted out to a level 1 trauma center. Not something the town that we live in had, or still has, but, I distinctly remember the ER nurse who is, finding out this man's having a massive heart attack, is looking at a woman who's got 2 kids, but is also still had the wherewithal to pay attention that I was in the room and managed to take care of every single person in that room in very different ways. And I remember while we were waiting to get him transferred out to the hospital, she still took the time, despite, especially on this side, knowing how much documentation she was going to have to do. You've got a crash cart full of medications. You've got all this documentation to go back and make sure, was this med given? Was this clinical pathway followed? All of which I was ignorant at the point. But all I knew is that she had gotten a Mountain Dew and a Snickers as a snack, which many ER nurses who are listening to this will know 100% is about your meal some days. And instead of sitting down to use it herself, she handed it to me and was like, everything's going to be okay. And that started the cascade, and ultimately went to nursing school, and then started in cardiac and pulmonary medicine was where I got my start.
That's incredible. And how long were you in cardiac and pulmonary medicine, out of curiosity?
About 4 years. I was on
Okay.
a really rapid paced cardiopulmonary step down unit. So doing telemetry and everything up to BiPAP, 100% FiO2, running every drip onto the planet. So basically they were alive enough not to quite be in the ICU to be with us. So it was really fast paced, war of attrition.
Wow. Wow. Well, that kind of leads me to 2 more questions then. What made you decide to transfer to case management, number 1?
Yeah, so I actually didn't go directly from cardiac into case management. I worked at a long-term acute care hospital that was in our town. And it was kind of about the time that we were really starting to look at compliance coming into the LTAC setting and ensuring that patients truly needed that level of care. So we were using Milliman and Interqual to class our patients as we were bringing them in versus waiting for them to get in. A lot of times working with your commercial payers and your Medicare Advantage payers. Medicare was a completely different side, but working with those commercial payers to ensure that you're being a good steward of their healthcare plan and that you truly need this level of care. And I was absolutely fascinated by the national patient care guidelines. They were incredible to me. I had been trained, had a really great director of business development who trained me, this is what an LTAC patient looks like. But it was fascinating because some of the patients that didn't look like LTAC patients still met those criteria. And it gave us the opportunity, in knowing those guidelines so well, to bring in patients that otherwise I feel like sometimes would have been missed, because you would have thought, well, do they really need it? No. Could they go home? Sure. Would they have had the same, outcome ultimately? Probably not. So getting to know those guidelines really well, I kind of felt like I had a secret language, and that eventually morphed into case management.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Okay. So then you decided to travel at some point.
Yeah.
So how long did it take for you to make that decision, and why did you decide to travel?
So it kind of gets to the point, nursing is as nursing does. When you get to know a job well enough, tends to be that nurses get a little itchy to go learn something new. It's one of the most diverse fields, and offers the ability to flex in as we have these seasons in life and you get new interests to kind of go the way of what interests you. And being that I was in a very small town and worked that job for almost 8 years, the opportunities started hitting other people around me, kind of from my telemetry cardiopulmonary step down unit days. And I had friends that I was seeing, living in an RV in Alaska, and I knew somebody who got a U.S. Virgin Islands contract, and I thought, well, why not me? So I honestly got out there and applied to every single travel company I knew existed, and just put the feelers out there and said my prayers and thought, well, if this is for me, it'll be for me. And it was really quickly for me.
That's great. That is great. So nowadays you're focused more on the sales side. I don't know if you want to speak to it. You're still practicing as a nurse in different function, but can you speak to your sales experience and everything that you're doing now?
Yeah, so kind of like our reference, nurses get to a point where you learn something really well, and there are those of us who, instead of deciding to sit still and be the expert in that field, you get to right at that cusp and decide, well, I know everything I need to know. Let's go learn a new skill, learn a new subset, whatever it be. And the opportunity came up to stay in case management, where my passion absolutely lies. I still have a lot of love for cardiac and pulmonary medicine, but case management, especially coming from a rural background and knowing just how hard case managers work, especially with limited resources, to get these patients to where they're at their safest, where their outcome's going to be the best. I thought the opportunity to be on the sales side and stick with travel, which I love and know, and also stay in the case management department where I never really want to leave, was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. So I decided to be a newbie once more.
Love it. Okay. All right. Well, as we kind of transition into the crux of this conversation, I definitely wanted to just get your perspective first, and now we can kind of drive this in. So, from staffing companies to travelers, we've kind of been programmed on the sales side, even in just travel healthcare all around, to speak about the money first. And this process is all about speed to market. In a perfect world, the idea is, how fast can I get you to leave your family, all that you know, to go on a travel assignment that is likely going to be within a struggling hospital. So can you talk to us about your traveling experience? Was it like this at all? If so, how was it? If not, how was it different?
Sure. So I will say, I did send out, when I first made the decision to travel and looked into it, there are so many people in this country who, at least, 5+ years ago, have my resume and all of my important data just floating around. But, I had a lot of calls from a lot of recruiters from different companies. And ultimately went with the recruiter who started the conversation with, tell me about yourself. Tell me what you love. Tell me what things are passions for you. Tell me which things, you don't love. Tell me places that you've loved going. Tell me places that you don't maybe ever want to go back to again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such an organic conversation. And I remember with that particular recruiter, our first conversation was about an hour and a half, versus every other person I had talked to said, hey, how much money are you making now? Hey, what are you doing now? Hey, here's the skills checklist. Can you complete it really quickly? Get it back to me ASAP. I have all of these opportunities across the country. And they never really took the opportunity to get to know who I am as a person. So I will say, ultimately, the decision to go into travel and to specifically travel with the recruiter more than the company was because of a relationship that was formed even in that first conversation. It was not transactional. It was not, what do I need to do to get you here? And, what do I need to do to get your business? It was, hey, we do have amazing opportunities, but I want to make sure one of these opportunities is right for you, not, the old concept of what is it? Round hole, square peg. It wasn't trying to shove something in and make something work just to tick a box. It was so truly very customized. I mean, it was very, I think the word is bespoke nowadays that everybody likes to use, but it was very much so a match made in heaven for me. And my first travel contract was exactly that. And it came from not leading with money. And I will say this was pre-pandemic, which has changed and shaped what healthcare looks like today, and especially how travel is looked at and how sometimes we are often viewed. And you know, there's a grace that goes with having started this prior to the pandemic, working through and working after. But I don't think I would have ever really chosen to travel had every single recruiter called back and had the same discussion. What will it take to get you to move? I
Wow.
mean, so
Wow. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, and I know you just pretty much spoke to this, it was obviously more about the relationship.
yes,
And was money ever an issue at that point? Now, obviously, knowing your value is one thing. That's one thing. But
absolutely.
was there ever a point during this experience for you, as your recruiter was building this relationship, where you kind of looked back and saw the money that was being offered and said, "Wow, I'm never doing that. I don't care if that's with you or with anyone else." Has that ever happened?
To be honest, no. The first recruiter that called me has been my recruiter my entire career.
Right.
Again, it was something that I felt like she stood out in the industry for me. And knowing her as you do, she does stand out in the industry still to this day. So, no, I mean, my first travel contract the money was fantastic. Um, and that was something that she was very careful in making sure that my background in knowing rural North Carolina, I was able to travel fairly close to home, still over that 50-mile radius, and had a heck of a commute. But I was able to serve my community, which is really important to me, and to stay in North Carolina, which is really important. And to also get my feet underneath me and learning a new system, learning a new way to do things, honing skills. Because even if you are an expert and you are going into travel, you learn something new at every single travel contract you do. You're going to learn something new. So initially it was more her knowing that I wanted that level of comfortability. The money just happened to align. And you and I have spoke about that. This is actually how you and I met. But my second contract, I basically went on a paid vacation and went to Hawaii. I made no money. I probably honestly lost money. But again, the money motivation was not the leading factor for me to ever travel.
Wow.
And I think that is much like your recruiters being relational. I think that's also where you find out your travel consultants who are going to be champions for your company, who are going to be unspoken leaders in the healthcare system that you're placing them in. I think that's where you weed out those people pretty quickly. We all have to make a living. We all have our mortgages and our car payments and our dogs who have expensive food, but it has to balance out with your values and your personal ethos along with what your paycheck looks like. And I don't think if you can't balance that, travel's not going to be for you, and it's not going to be for you for long at bare minimum.
Well said. I really can't speak much more to that. That was perfectly stated. I thank you for sharing that. So, speaking of the money motivation factor, do you think that a money motivation mindset could be high risk in travel healthcare, possibly for the staffing company or for the traveler? And if so, how?
Yeah. So, and I'm actually going to add to that too, just sitting here thinking about that, listening to that. I think for both the company, but also importantly for the health system that the consultant's going to, if money is the only reason that you are motivated to be in travel, to be in healthcare, and we all know it's a war of attrition. I said it earlier. Healthcare is dynamic. It's overran these days with just sometimes it seems more patients than providers, with short staffing, with insurance changes that really kind of sometimes dictate how healthcare is delivered. When you have somebody who's going into travel and their only motivation is money, I think then you're losing sight of what all of our number one priority should be, and that's the patient. That's why every last one of us went into healthcare. So yeah, extremely high risk to me, given that again, the money has to be there or you simply can't work. I don't know many people who are in nursing because you're working for free. We all have our bills, we all have to live, we all like to eat. But to have that be your number one focus is really very high risk to me. And it's also the same for the traveler. I think it really promotes you to burnout. Um, and I think especially something that I never did, and this may come off as being perhaps naive, but knowing that there were other travelers in some of the healthcare systems that I was in, and even knowing that they were at other companies, I knew when I took that assignment that I was comfortable with what I was making to be able to afford to temporarily live somewhere and work in an assignment. And I never made it a point to go and speak to other travelers and say, "Hey, what are you bringing home every week?" And that may seem naive, but comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
If you are going to an assignment and your initial numbers look great and you've found housing that you can afford and you like the assignment, I think it's really dangerous for travelers to start looking at other people. And even if you say, "Hey, well, this person works for XYZ amount of dollars, but I feel like I work harder than them and I'm more invested in them and I give more to the healthcare system. Maybe I can get XYZ plus $50 more a week." But to me, again, that's focusing on the wrong priority. It should be the patient. It should be your health and well-being. And you already knew what you were going in there to make as far as the consultant. And if, to me also, some things are learning experiences. If you took an assignment and you were on the cusp of, "Whoa, goodness, I'm not going to make a lot of out of this one, but this is where I want to be," then, I think you take that as your lesson.
Mhm.
And, you're there and you're there to prove a point. And I think you also give yourself the opportunity to show what your value is and what your work ethic is and what you bring to the system. And, maybe have those conversations on the back end on an extension, but I just don't ever think it should be the driving reason that you go and take an assignment.
Love it. Love it. And if I could add in terms of that high risk towards the staffing company, uh, one of the things we've seen is, by establishing this go to this hospital for this money mindset,
Hmm.
um, we're not building any rapport. We're not giving somebody a reason to feel that they could trust us. I mean, these
Right.
conversations happen over the phone. How often do we get a chance to meet our travelers? It's very rare. So to take that approach, it can be very high risk. It can also just lead to somebody else saying, "You know what, I'm going to go to the next place for the next dollar, and that's it." And what happens to it? So then what happens is it creates a strife. It creates all this tension between the staffing company and travelers and staffing companies. And again, we're taking the main reason we're doing this out of sight because of this particular mindset, and that is to provide quality health care to the patient. So thank you. Thank you for
I
saying
agree.
that. Thank you. Okay. All right. So going to some of your suggestions. Okay. Is there anything that you would suggest to anyone in traveling? Maybe something uh, they should ask about a recruiter or company that's representing them on a travel assignment?
Yeah, absolutely. Much like I would say my first recruiter, but my only recruiter, um, she was very invested in me as a person, but I was also extremely invested in her. Personal details are something that people choose to share on varying degrees. But I knew my recruiter. I knew her husband's name. I knew her children's names. I knew where she liked to travel. I knew what kind of music she listened to. Um, much like it creates a relationship from the consultant to the recruiter, it also creates one from the recruiter to the consultant. And I think that's where you build loyalty. And I think that's where you build these people who are champions of other people. And again, with the patient being in mind, if you are in the medical field and you are not a champion for people and knowing people down to the level of their goodness, I just don't think you've got a place in it for a really long time. So I think the biggest thing is when you have a recruiter or a company backing you, know what that company's values are, know what their principles are, know the type of people that they put to work. Look at their satisfaction scores. Ask your recruiter if, how they feel about the company, because that typically tells people a lot as well. It was something that, again, me going into it, I wanted somebody who was in for the long haul, who I felt was very invested. I am a millennial by birth, barely, but not a big fan of jumping 401ks and learning about new health insurances every 13 weeks. And so I was very careful in cultivating the company that I was ultimately going to choose, and stayed with them for quite a long time, really until I sort of switched gears in my career for a little bit. So I think it's just important that you equally get to know your recruiter. You get to know the company that you are going to be the face of, because people do business with people. They don't do businesses with business. I think it's so important that you not align yourself with a company that perhaps you don't agree with how they spend their money. You vote with your dollar, and you're voting with your own dollar when you're working for a company. So I think a lot of it is just, again, having that relationship, building that rapport, knowing where your loyalties lie.
Great. And it kind of, I can think of one particular idea here where I would just say, or if you're a traveler, imagine what it means when you go onto a permanent assignment or a permanent role. Okay, so if you're on a permanent role, are you really looking to be there for 13 weeks, or are you looking to establish longevity? So
Right.
there are staffing companies out there that it's just about give me these 13 weeks. And again, that is going back to that high risk mentality. It can kind of, you get what you get. That's the mentality that you're just going to get what you can. Now, there are other companies that they want you in for the long haul. Yes, I want you for 13 weeks, but I want you to trust that I got you for every
Exactly.
13-week assignment. So great point. I love this conversation. This is great.
It's a good one to have.
This is. Okay. All right. So last question. If you could speak for all travelers, what would be the most important item you would want staffing companies to keep in mind when working to get a traveler to join?
That one's actually a pretty easy one. Your travelers are still people. They're not numbers. I think probably the biggest issue that I have with this industry at times is that it is quantity over quality. And I think that promotes the whole reason we're having this conversation today. And you are ultimately employing a human being. It is somebody who has a family, who has familiarity, who has friends, who has everything that they know in one spot. Even those of us who are well versed and have pockets of people all over the United States, thanks to all of our years of travel, it's still, you have a home base, you have something that you love and something that you hold on to. And we are going as the face of a company to work for you and be a liaison to a health system, and valuing your traveler as a person and not a number is the way they wouldn't even have to have this conversation necessarily if everyone did business exactly like that.
Great. Well, I got nothing else. Do you have any questions for me? Let me start there.
Oh man. I guess my big question is what made you get into this? I've answered, but I'd love to hear your original backstory as to how you got into staffing.
Well, that is a long story, but I'd be more than happy to share. I've always had a passion for learning, and I'm not a nurse. I will never say that I am, and never will try to be. But there was a time in my life when I had a lady friend that was in nursing school, and she ended up going through so much turmoil and trying to study and stress, and I just decided to read some of her books, and I just decided to test her, and it just got it to a point where I just started to get really passionate about it. So she'd come home and she'd start telling me more and more about code reds and code blues and code blacks, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, what are you talking about? So she would talk to me more and more about that. Got to a point where I reached out to a travel nursing company that was starting an IT company, and they were staffing IT. And at one point, I had been let go from kind of a more technical staffing firm, and so IT was kind of in my background when it came to that. So it was a good first step, but then I just kept looking at that travel nursing company and just saying, you know what, I think I want to do that. I think I want to do this. It would be a great idea to just be able to show that I can talk about this stuff. I know what I'm doing. So ended up getting to a point where I was offered an opportunity to recruit for travel nursing. But then I noticed that that specific company that I worked for was very, very transactional. And I'm just not that guy. I'm not that person. I didn't want anyone to view me as somebody that's just going to send them somewhere away from their family. I just didn't feel right about it. And just for the money, just go to work. That's all I want you to do is just go to work. And that was kind of the mentality that was set up. And I started asking myself questions. Would I send my mother to this assignment? Would I send my mother to an assignment where she had to find her own housing? She had to drive there on her own. It didn't make sense. It didn't add up. That's not a way to take care of somebody. Right. So I was blessed with an opportunity. That was an opportunity I was definitely blessed with because I learned what to do and what not to do. But I was also blessed with an opportunity to work for a company that kind of created this case management staffing format, if you will. And it took off from there. That company allowed me to literally be every person that I wanted to be. And that sounds kind of schizophrenic in a way, but the one person I wanted to be was naturally just John. I just wanted to take care of people. I wanted them to see that I care about them. It's not about the money to me. I'll give you everything I can give you, as long as I can give it to you, So that job gave me a great opportunity to just learn more about not only the nursing side, but more about case management, more about social work, utilization review. And then I fell in love with case management. And again, I'm not a nurse. I'm not a case manager. I'm not a social worker, but I have the utmost respect for everyone that does this job. And I will be very clear when I say this. I believe case management is the underdog of the hospital, and the value that is added from a case management perspective is one that is completely understated. And I will not rest until every hospital knows that. So there's my passion.
Speaking from the case management side, we would all say we agree with you, and let's go John on that conquest.
So, well, there you go. Well, Reese, thank you so much. It is great. It's a pleasure to always be able to talk to you on a consistent basis, but it's just great to know your perspective, to hear your mindset, and to be able to work with you to help others naturally every day. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you so much for having me. We always have great conversations. This is probably going to be high up as one of my favorites. So
we do. It's pretty funny. So, all right. Well, thank you again. Have a wonderful evening. And for those of you that are tuning in, thank you. We'll see you next time on Suitcases.